My name is Stephanie, and I live and grow mushrooms on the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations in BC. Growing mushrooms is a truly fun and rewarding experience. Harvesting them right off of your countertop and into a stir fry is wholesome, to say the least. But the real satisfaction for me is knowing that I have all of the skills, materials, and knowledge necessary to grow my own economical and sustainable protein. There are multiple entry points to growing mushrooms, regardless of the type that you're growing, akin to the difference between planting vegetables from seed as opposed to seedlings. It was 2019 when I first wanted to learn to grow mushrooms, and it was a lot harder to find resources and materials at that time. Thankfully, for Grow Mushrooms Canada, I was able to order all of my kind of first round of grow materials, and that really kickstarted my journey.
Once you've got the mushroom fever, you've got the mushroom fever, and it just goes from there. It takes a life of its own and takes over the life.
Jessica began her mushroom growing journey by inoculating shiitake logs in her backyard. She then started Grow Mushrooms Canada because she was having a hard time finding good quality mushroom cultures and grain spawn that were not imported from the United States. Now, her company sells a wide variety of mycology supplies, many of which are great for beginners.
The very first step would be to get one of those like ready to fruit kits. All you have to do is cut open the bag and keep it humid, misting it, and you'll get, in this case, it's yellow oyster mushrooms. But this bag has so much potential in it. There is a huge amount of fungal mycelium growing in here. So in addition to this being just something you can fruit right from itself, you can expand it into, say, a bucket of straw or hardwood chips. Oyster mushrooms are definitely a good species to start with because they're such a strong, aggressive decomposer of substrates, and they're not a picky eater either. They'll eat all sorts of different kinds of material. Another one is the wine cap, which produce huge burgundy mushrooms that are so prolific and beautiful and fun and easy to grow. It's simply crumbling this up and mixing it outdoors in a bed of straw or wood chips. This will produce shiitake mushrooms. You tap into, drill holes in logs and tap into the log, and then it grows out of the dowel and into the log and through the log, and eventually will be ready to make the shiitake mushroom grow out of the log. My shiitake logs have been growing for 7 years, the particular ones I have now. You're going to get different properties from different logs. Some of them are hardwood, like an oak tree, and it might take longer for the first time to get your mushrooms to fruit. Might take years if it's a large diameter log, but then you're going to have seasonal production for many, many years off of it. Just experiment, try it. Someone might not have tried that before. Maybe it works really well. Maybe you won't get the biggest crop. You know, if you're growing commercially and you want to make a profit, then those are great interest to you. You want to maximize your yields and minimize your contamination and things like that. But if you're growing for yourself or for your friends and family, you might not have the biggest yield, but you'll get something even if it's not perfect. So go ahead and grow in your pasteurized straw or even unpasteurized straw. You'll have some successes for sure.
Amanita muscaria is one of the few mushrooms that will continue to grow after you pick it. If you pick this mushroom in its button stage and put it into a little glass jar with a wet paper towel, you can watch it grow to its full size over 3 days. And no, this will not harm you to touch it. Mushrooms are incredible because organic waste can be used as a substrate to grow those mushrooms. And once the mushrooms have fully digested that substrate, the resulting kind of mass that's left over can be used for feedstock or biofuel materials or packaging materials or just a healthy addition to your soil in the garden. Today, there are a ton of companies in our backyard doing incredible things with mycelium and mushrooms. One of these many companies is Circular Harvest.
Our mission, perhaps to start off with, is to reshape agriculture from a linear to circular agri-food economy.
The history of agriculture, like starting with the Green Revolution, where we used pesticides and fertilizers, which was a great thing, like we fed the whole world, but then now we've used them for too long and now that thing that fed the whole world is actually killing the planet. Circular agriculture is designing waste out of agriculture through collaboration and local economies.
We started with growing mushrooms in a tent in our shed, as most do when they start out. And we were trying to sell them at the Abbotsford Farmers Market, but we're having a hard time. We're making like $5 per container. I was like, how are we going to start a business like this?
We're making that grow kit at the beginning anyway to even fruit our own mushrooms. So we're like, okay, let's focus on the grow kit as our first product, and then let's see where the business takes us from there. A lot of people don't really know where their food's coming from, so when they get to do it themselves and they grow it, there's like, oh, this is cool. Like, I didn't realize how fast mushrooms grow. You just appreciate your food a lot more.
Without feeling a connection to where your food is grown, it's hard to care about it.
Mm-hmm.
I asked Circular Harvest, as a small-scale grower, what is the biggest lesson you've learned so far?
Learning why contamination happens, knowing now that it could be coming from just that agar dish I made 4 weeks ago, but didn't see it once it went in the grain, and then now I just put that grain into 30 bags, so that just makes it huge. We're making a barcode system that captures it all, so when we inoculate, the recipe that we use, when it's inoculated, the strains, the generation's all in there, and then at every stage of if it gets contaminated, when is it fully colonized, when are we moving it into fruiting, when are we harvesting, what's the weight of those harvests, and then we can capture that all without having to go back into an Excel sheet like we used to.
So what about the plastic waste that's involved in mushroom growing?
There is alternatives to the plastic bag, which is the bottle method. That again, you get like 6 uses out of a bottle and it's thrown in the garbage. And then you can only grow certain types with that. So either way, there's plastic being used globally, and there's really no way to not use plastic in the current method of having to sterilize and everything. If you're a hobby farmer, there's lots of ways to do it. But if commercially, there's no way to actually like do it efficiently enough, unless you're doing mushrooms.
Mycology is raising life, and life starts in the petri dish. I like to think of each stage of growing fungi in a similar way to how an infant learns to eat. We start with basic digestible nutrients like milk, and then slowly over time we increase the complexity of the food that they are eating. If you have mushroom spores, you can't just drop them into a bag of wood chips and expect it to grow mushrooms. While yes, this is the way it happens in the wild, controlled indoor cultivation is different. Instead, a common practice is to grow out the mycelium onto agar-agar dishes. Make sure that it is contamination-free and that you have a healthy culture that knows how to digest basic sugars. Then you give it something a little bit more complex, like a rye grain. Once the mycelium knows how to eat that rye grain, you can mix that grain spawn with wood chips or straw or something that has very little sugar. And by that time, the mycelium is strong and it can survive off of very little. And that is how you get mushrooms.
There's so many different opportunities within mushrooms and mycelium.
That's the hardest part.
Yeah, and that has turned out to be the hardest part, is how to focus on one of those things, or maybe 5 of those things.
You would be hard-pressed to find a mushroom grower that has not thought about starting a company. There are a lot of small-scale operations of gourmet and specialty mushroom varieties like oysters and maitake. But the truth is, they're hard to manage. They degrade very quickly. You don't often see them on grocery store shelves for this reason. They don't fit well within the existing kind of retail grocery store level. David started Oyster & King to solve this problem and offer local distribution to restaurants. His family's been farming mushrooms for nearly 25 years. Let's say that somebody's super in love with growing mushrooms and they're like, I really want to start a mushroom farm. Do you have any advice?
It would be probably to work with an established grower and learn the key skills. Like if you do it yourself, all of those mistakes will be your expenses. Try to learn it in an environment where you're exposed to more volume.
BC is Canada's second largest mushroom producing province, next to Ontario. 88% of that total mushroom production is dedicated to agaricus mushrooms, which are your standard kind of grocery store mushrooms, cremini, button mushrooms, portobello mushrooms, which by the way are all the same mushroom. The remaining 12% is dedicated to gourmet or specialty varieties of mushrooms like oyster mushrooms, maitake mushrooms, etc. What's interesting is that the vast majority of mushroom cultivators are actually growing gourmet varieties. This is because the button mushroom production is predominantly owned by a few larger companies, as opposed to gourmet varieties are owned by a bunch of small farms.
Button mushrooms have always been the majority of volume that has been sold on the market. If specialty varieties even increase 2 or 3-fold or to like 10% of the market, that would be a dream. You know, that would be mind-blowing, and I actually think it's possible. I think it's trending in that direction.
Mushrooms are certainly trending. In October of 2023, David partnered with Ignite Pizzeria in Yaletown on a sold-out mushroom night, which featured gourmet, cultivated, and wild foraged mushrooms. The popularity of the event made me ask, how can small mushroom farms scale to meet the demand?
I don't know that trying to scale is an achievable goal for a small-scale grower. And I don't know that it should be, actually. I'm not completely certain that one should try, especially if one has a good margin in a niche market, like you're producing for a farmer's market or something. The reason I don't think it's a good idea is because I've never seen the margin support that, even to this day. In a nutshell, the market price of mushrooms doesn't suggest that there is a path from being a small-scale grower growing at markets to becoming a large-scale producer. For button mushrooms, it's taken scale to be able to do what they do.
Button mushroom farmers face an entirely different set of challenges. We've been growing button mushrooms in the Fraser Valley area since the 1920s. Comparably, gourmet varieties we only really started growing in the late 1970s and 1980s. The way that button mushroom farming has been able to scale is truly incredible, to the point where they have such a large labor shortage that these mushrooms cannot be picked in time and they cannot be delivered and distributed to the people who want them. Formerly known as Tech Brew Robotics, Forage is revolutionizing the button mushroom industry.
We need to solve this global issue, which is access to labor in a mushroom harvesting environment, and then also using robots to optimize yield. The average farm loses about 1/3 of their harvesters every year. It's not a very enjoyable job. The idea is not to replace all of the human beings at a mushroom farm. It's to have different skill sets there that, again, are put in a position where they can optimize the operations of the farm and create kind of more meaningful jobs that drive towards a greater output of food from the farms. Growing mushrooms and doing it well is not an easy job for the farms that do it. I think the piece that makes Forage really special is it's rare in Canada you get to be a part of a company that's on the path to being the very best company in the world in its space. And that to me is compelling. It's a fascinating challenge to solve mushroom harvesting. It's a very nuanced space with a lot of intricacies that are difficult to pick up on. As you know, they grow in tight clumps, they double in size every 24 hours. They're very delicate. They break more easily or bruise more easily than a tomato or any other source of produce. And what we did is we created a way of picking the mushroom without damaging it. They can see how many picks per minute there are. They can tell the robot which mushrooms to prioritize based on the orders they have coming in. So we want to pick only a certain size. You have the ability to instruct the robot on outcomes that you want to achieve. And then you can see how it's performing. If there's any issues, it'll flag it for you. It's silly to me how much food we send all over the world, when if we had the right opportunities within large geographies, we could grow that food closer to people, reduce the amount of time that it needs to be shipped, reduce how it needs to be shipped, and be able to get fresh food to people faster. We think robots play a key role in any sense of facilitating indoor agriculture to be successful. I think that the piece that I'm excited about and quite frankly nervous about is when we reinvent the mushroom industry, where majority of the labor in a mushroom farm today is focused on picking, trimming, and packing mushrooms. And that's what our robots are accomplishing. Is what does that do to change the industry? What are the opportunities that creates? What are the new jobs that creates? I'd say that the seam of opportunity that's changing when you create something that's as disruptive as a robot automating an entire industry means that there's a lot of good that can come from it, but also needs to be a mindful approach to how we reinvent the mushroom industry. Where do mushroom farms exist in the future if you take away one of the biggest constraints for them today, which is access to labor?
While most farmers will farm mycelium in order to actually produce the fruiting body of the mushroom and sell that, there's also benefits and opportunities to actually just focusing on the mycelium. Mycelium is such an incredible, under-researched, underappreciated part of the mushroom life cycle. In BC, there's a company that's really leading the way.
If I had to go back to the original etymology of where the company began, it started with the question, how do you grow a cow in space? How many cows per minute? What's capable here?
2 cows per minute.
We have a capability to produce the equivalent biomass of 2 cows per minute through this process. That's what the math tells us, and there's no other form of production that can achieve that.
Maya Farms is taking crop milling waste and fermenting it with water, sugar, salts, and mushroom culture, somewhat similar to kombucha fermentation. In 7 days, they can harvest and dry a protein product that has 66 grams of protein per 100 gram serving and 100% of your daily iron.
When we say biomass fermentation, we're taking agricultural commodities, and instead of giving it to cattle, which will take 1 calorie of output, 27 calories of input, versus our process, 1 calorie of input means 1 calorie of output. The inefficiency of the system actually is we clear forests, we take that feed, we feed it to animals at a low rate of efficiency. Well, we can decrease our footprint, our human footprint, allow the forests to rejuvenate, and then take that concentrated feed, feed it to mycelium or mushrooms, and get a much better output. It's not the scientists that feed the world, it's the farmers. And we have to create the conditions that farmers are able to do this. In our lab, we've evaluated over 10 different potential feedstocks, and that way we will be able to replicate this in many different locations, regardless of the feedstock that's available to us. And that's a big part of the work that we're doing, is what is the right feedstock for the right mushroom.
I got to taste one of the first sausages ever made by Maya Farms, and it was delicious. It didn't have any of that bitter kind of aftertaste that you often find with plant-based protein.
If we're solving one problem with mycelium protein production, it is taste and texture. And it's not that there isn't a large consumer demand for plant-based proteins in replacement of animal-based proteins. It's that they're underperforming because taste and texture is not quite right there.
When fungus are digesting and eating their food, they really change the whole chemical compound of the actual starches or the proteins that they digest. And so what you get is almost an entirely different product from the pre-digested media to the final media. And this is a big reason as to why this bitterness disappears, is because the mycelium is digesting, and then what you're left with is a very neutral tasting protein that's very nutritious, very easy to digest, and again, it doesn't have that bitterness, has that nice texture to it that we're all looking for.
Plant proteins are fundamentally different from animal proteins. So where plant proteins are sticky and gelatinous, animal proteins are fibrous. So we love the texture of the fibrous proteins. In our pursuit to identify the perfect fungal strain, we can screen using the morphology, right, to find a fibrous mushroom that that matches animal proteins.
Big project that we've been working on for 3 years is to be able to demonstrate that we can grow fungi for a future mission to the moon or Mars. It's called the Deep Space Food Challenge, and we partnered with Ecoation, who's the next door neighbor here, who's really the lead of that project. We've established our bioreactor as a core component that goes into what we call the canned grow system. It's a polyculture food production system that can meet the dietary needs of a 4 astronaut crew mission over a 3-year mission to the moon or Mars. The astronauts are not going to sustain themselves on lettuce. So this is where the introduction of a protein source that can be produced on site is so critical, and why the Canadian Space Agency is so interested in this form of technology. But what it's really about is, can you create a technology that, in the eyes of the Canadian Space Agency, that can feed Northern Canadians? Is this something that can go and deploy to remote communities? We're not the first ones in the space. This is an industry that is a case of a rising tide raises all ships. It's not going to be a case of one company takes all. We need many people working on this solution. When I frame it in that perspective for people that are in agriculture and food production, they recognize, okay, this is truly a technology that we need to put so much effort into as a human species to be able to potentially ward off some very difficult food production challenges that we're going to face by the middle of the century. We're thinking big. We're 5 years. We're really we're thinking beyond our little office here.
I love it. And beyond our little planet.
Yes, and beyond our little planet, our precious planet, our very precious planet.
BC is a melting pot of culture and diversity, and it's just teeming with mushroom lovers. I believe it is the perfect location for innovation in mushrooms and mycology. This episode covered just a few of the many companies leading the way in the space. If you're just learning to grow mushrooms, I know it can be overwhelming at first. Apart from the fact that you're learning an entirely new language, there's so many different recipes, approaches, and techniques that it can be hard to know where to start. I'm here to tell you to just start. It's all about trial and error and learning from your own mistakes. With a little bit of patience and a lot of love, you'll be growing your own mushrooms in no time.